Before wine became a luxury, before it became a score, a label, a prize, it was something sacred. In ancient Greece, philosophers debated truth while sharing the diluted wine under the stars. In biblical times, wine symbolized transformation, covenant, even divinity. Wine built empires, wine inspired theater, wine shaped religion. But what did they really drink? Was it refined? Was it wild? And why has wine followed humanity through every civilization? Today, I sit down with master of wine, Richard Bampfield, to explore how wine shaped history and how history still shapes the wine in our glass. Richard, welcome to have you back.
It's lovely to be here, Lily.
Let's straight away to the questions. Socrates.
Socrates,
Yes.
one of my favourite subjects. Okay,
So if I pour a glass of what Socrates actually drank, would you really recognize it?
probably not. No, I mean, I think we do have quite good records of the style of wine that they drank in Socrates' day, so which was what, about, I think, 300 or 400 BC.
Yeah.
And in those days, the wine would have been, generally it would have been flavoured with something that would both preserve it
Yeah.
and or remove any nasty flavours.
Yeah.
And so they used to use various things to do that. The most famous that we're familiar with these days
Yeah.
is pine resin. So
Oh,
they used resin to coat the amphora, and then that would give us distinctive flavour to the wine as well. And it would stop oxidation while the wine was in the amphora, and I suspect that the resin in the wine also helped it age better.
Yeah.
And stop it going off. But they also used to add seawater, believe it or not.
Seawater?
Yes.
Wow.
Slightly ironic, because these days we use the word salinity in a wine to indicate quality. It's one of the characteristics that wine lovers these days are after, particularly in white wines, and so no salinity. But we certainly don't add seawater anymore. But the other aspect, and possibly this was a good thing if you had wines that were flavoured with pine resin or seawater, the wine that Socrates drank would almost certainly have been diluted. Because they didn't normally drink it neat. They would normally have diluted it to maybe 3-4% alcohol.
Oh, I see.
Because wine was meant to, as far as Socrates was concerned, wine was the social lubricant. It also enabled the philosophy to flow, let's say.
That makes sense. It's hard to debate life when you black out drunk.
It's unfortunate, isn't it? Because often when people have had too many drinks, that's why when they think they're at the smartest. But probably not. No, you're absolutely right. For a really good philosophical discussion, it helps if you haven't had too much to drink, but maybe just enough to lower inhibitions. And I think that's key, that you want just enough to drink for people to feel comfortable and able to say what they want to say, but not so much that they're unable to articulate their thoughts anymore.
I've heard in their time, if you drink wine directly from the amphora or without adding anything, they would call you barbarian.
Well, that's right. That was considered sort of a barbarian or savage behaviour if you drank your wine neat.
It's very different from today's standard.
I think there were different types of occasion, and we know that there were certain occasions when they felt no shame in drinking wine neat, and they did so, and there are plenty of records of people getting drunk, but there were also occasions when they would drink it diluted. And I think for the certainly in more civilized company, let's say, they would have drunk it diluted.
Okay, so Greek drink the diluted wine. What about the most famous wine miracle in the Bible, when Jesus turned water into wine? And in the Bible they said it's good wine. What's a good wine really mean in those days?
Again, it's really hard for us to be sure. But one would imagine that it would almost certainly be a sweeter wine, because one of the ways they could produce wine that would keep, sugar of course is a preservative, and so if you make sweeter styles of wine, they keep for longer than drier wines. And very often they would dry the grapes, and drying the grapes concentrated the sugars and would produce the best quality sweet wines. And I suspect, a bit like in the 20th century in Europe as well, sometimes the best vintages would be the warmest ones, where the grapes ripened a bit more fully and had their own natural sugars.
So is it like it's the modern days Madeira or the ports?
Possibly a bit like Madeira or ports, but also I think of wines like Amarone in Italy, where they dry the grapes. intentionally and ferment the dried grapes.
I've heard the sugar or the sweets things a luxury in the past.
I think it's hard for us to be sure, but I think sweet things were prized.
Yeah.
We know they prized foodstuffs like honey, for instance, and that sort of thing. So yes, I think that the sweeter wines almost certainly would have been the most prized ones.
Jesus didn't create a Sauvignon Blanc for the wedding of Cana.
I think that if Jesus had served his guests Sauvignon Blanc, he would have been very unpopular. That was simply not the style of wine. That would have felt very unfamiliar to them, I think.
Barbarian drink.
Yeah. Now, Lily, I have a feeling
Yes.
we might have some Greek wine in front of us.
Well, I can feel it just come out from the amphora 2,000 years ago. What's the vintage? 2,000 or 4,000 years ago?
Let's try it. It's
Yes.
a rosé red Cena. Go for universal.
So let's talk about Rome. So in the Roman times, they have a wine called Falernian. Would you tell us a little bit more about what is really Falernian wine?
So Falernian was the most famous wine in those times. It was written about by a writer called Pliny, and Pliny obviously enjoyed his wine.
Yeah.
And he told us quite a lot about how they grew the grapes and how they made the wines. Falernian again would have been made from white grapes, almost certainly, probably from the region we now know as Campania, inland from Naples and Mount Vesuvius, and it would have been made from white grapes and probably aged in amphora, and it would have turned a sort of deeper brown and amber colour, and would probably have been sweet. Yes.
It all makes sense. I went to Pompeii ruins. You can see lots of wine vessels. I can imagine, in those days they drink all this Falernian in those vessels.
I think they would. I'm sure there were different grades of Falernian, depending on your status in society and what you drink. And we know from Pliny as well that there were certain vintages that were considered superior than others. So just in case you're offered some over 2,000-year-old Falernian, the year to look for is 121 BC. Okay, that was regarded as the best vintage, 121 BC.
121. When did you drink that?
Sadly, even I don't remember that one.
Yeah, but I've heard in the Roman time, the slaves also drink wine.
I think the slaves would have drunk wine. They were probably driven to it, I suspect. But as I say,
Sounds like they're very nice to
there
the
would have been
slaves.
different grades of wine for different levels of society. My fear is that the slaves would have been given the wine that had gone off, but it still had alcohol. So it was, from their point of view, it was probably better than nothing.
Wine is very hierarchy symbol.
I suspect that if you were a slave, you probably did drink it to try and forget, rather than diluting it to philosophize.
Probably from the wine vessel, you also have a hint what kind of social status.
Yes, I'm sure that's true. Well, you've been to Pompeii. You know what? You've seen the amphora there. It's got a lovely nose. It has got really like that.
Beautiful.
It's very, very unusual. The resin is quite strong, but it's refreshing.
I actually tried it. It's really have this very subtle pine. What's it called? Resin, right?
I think it's amazing.
It does have a little bit these medicinal hints there, spice. Wow, I feel I'm the Greek goddess now.
You
Back
look
to the
like
time.
the Greek goddess. I'll call you Aphrodite from now on.
So nice. I forgot what we are. I told you when the gods arrive, I just forget what Socrates drink. Who cares? Who cares?
I think it takes more than a god.
The Greeks has the Dionysus, is the god of wine, and also theater and madness.
Yes.
What's this weird combo? How you explain it?
Dionysus is an extraordinary figure.
Yeah.
And he's in some ways a very romantic figure. He's almost the god of chaos in my book, because he's the god of wine, he's the god of theatre, like the patron saint of theatre. But also there's this element of madness, but also of magic with Dionysus. So the sort of ecstasies and rituals that are associated with Dionysus, most memorably written about by Euripides in the play The Bacchae, which is a Greek tragedy. It is about how, it's wrong I think to say that how wine drives you mad. It's about how wine, the environment, the community, and probably other elements that were added to the wine can drive you mad, can create this feeling of ecstasy if you want. And then when that's experienced in a group setting, it sort of amplifies it somehow. So the effect on, I think if any one of those individuals had drunk or consumed what was in the glass, it wouldn't have been the same. But it's the sense of community, the togetherness, the fact that they've all done it together, and it builds into this crescendo of madness.
So wine is like a spiritual drug in certain way.
I'm not sure it's, as I said, I don't think it's just the wine. It's really interesting that I was reading a book recently called The Immortality Key. And in the Immortality Key, they reckon that there's this place called Eleusis on the east coast of Greece, where they had these ancient religions, rituals, and it was famous. All the people would go to Eleusis on a sort of pilgrimage. And they reckon that the goddess there prepared, the priestess, prepared potions which were probably wine-based, but probably with hallucinogenic substances. So maybe mushrooms or herbs or other elements that were hallucinogenic. And so it wasn't just the wine. There were probably other elements they added to it which helped create this madness, this temporary madness.
That's probably how Socrates got all these great ideas.
No, I don't think so actually. Socrates was quite capable of having one too many on occasion, but remember that a key attribute of the Stoic philosophy is self-control. It is one of the aspects I really like about it is if something is outside of your sphere of control, don't worry about it. There's nothing you can do about it. But anything that's within your sphere of control, then you exercise control. And obviously whether you get drunk or not is down to you. So that is within your sphere of control. So actually Socrates, he did, we reckon, stay relatively sober most of the time. And in the symposium, Plato's symposium, while all around him were getting drunk and falling over and gradually conking out, Socrates was the one who kept talking, kept arguing. Now, I'm sure he did have a drink or two, but he was the one who at 5 in the morning left, walking upright to go about his day's work.
He probably put something else in his glass to keep him sober while others...
Maybe that's what the true philosopher does.
And catch all the final essence of the debate.
It could be. Yes, it's a shame we don't have recordings of those. It could be entertaining.
So wine is such a beautiful thing, also terrifying.
Well, wine is, look, it is capable of, I think it depends so much on the type of wine and also the mood of the drinker. And it can create good experiences. I'm sure it can create bad experiences as well.
I'm sure.
Possibly for you.
Roma had this party called Bacchanalia.
Bacchanalia.
That's got so out of control.
I think, Lily, it doesn't matter how much you've prepared for that one, it's a tough one.
Maybe Italian call it Bacchanalia. So the Senate tried to ban them. What happened there then?
So the Bacchanalia, that was the Roman name for the ecstasies that I was talking about just now, that Dionysus was associated with. So the Roman name for Dionysus is Bacchus, and so the Roman name for these parties of excess, let's say, were called Bacchanalia. And wine was certainly a key part of the Bacchanalia, because it was wine that helped create the ambiance. The ambiance to begin with, and then the chaos to end up with.
So the Roman Senate conquered half of the known world, and then this is what separates them.
There is this juxtaposition. Yes, the Roman Empire was incredibly successful, and it built some very successful armies, but they also knew how to have a good time.
That's true. I don't mind to try one or two of their Bacchanalias.
There you go. Make sure I get the invitation too. But we also know that through the Roman Empire, that's how vines spread to so much of the rest of Europe. We know that the Romans were growing vines in the south of France, in Spain, and probably other parts that they conquered as well. Maybe North Africa. The Romans were very instrumental in spreading viticulture and the culture of wine.
I wonder how many of these Roman varieties still exist. I've heard there's still some around Rome area.
It's interesting, and I'd love to read up more about that. They reckon that one of the grapes used to make Falernian might have been Falernian, which you still find in Campania. But I'd love to read up more of that, about which grapes they think would have been around in those days. Yes.
It seems like they have have more white grape variety than red one. Or the method make every wine turn out to be brown
Again,
color.
I don't really know. My hunch is that there probably were more white grapes. I suspect most of the wines would have been made from grapes before they were fully ripe.
Yeah.
Because the longer you leave the grapes on the vine, the more likely they are to be hit by bad weather or rot or disease or something like that. So I suspect the grapes were often picked a bit before they were fully ripe. If you pick white grapes before they're fully ripe, you can still make a good wine. If you pick red grapes before they're fully ripe, the tannins in the skins aren't ripe. So you're likely to make quite a bitter tasting wine if you make it from red grapes. So I suspect that white grapes were more popular than red grapes. And also for many people, white grapes, particularly Muscat, it makes really nice eating grapes as well, table grapes. And I suspect the grapes would have been popular for eating as well.
That all makes sense.
Yeah.
Back to ancient Egypt, we all know Egypt like to bury their body with many things.
Yeah.
So why? But what shocked me is the labeled jars with the vintage and the vineyard name on it. That's insane.
It is, but that shows tremendous attention to detail, doesn't it? And it
Yeah.
shows that already in Egyptian times, they acknowledged that there were certain vineyards and certain vintages that produced better wines than others. One assumes that they wanted, if someone was important enough to merit one of those ancient tombs or sarcophagus, then they deserved the best wine. But maybe it was to bribe the god of the afterlife, Osiris.
You have God is control the life pleasure, and God is control the afterlife pleasure.
Well, it's okay, crikey. Right, in that case, I'm going to have to work harder in my current life then.
You still need to collect more bottles in your cellar, just in case.
Make sure I've got a few left over at the end. You're probably right.
So, do you think pharaohs drink better wine than Socrates?
I don't think we can answer that. But we have quite good records through the historians of what they used to drink in Roman and Greek times. We don't have such good records of what they drank in Egypt at the same time. And so we don't really know. There's no reason why not. There are vineyards in Egypt today. There are vineyards around Alexandria.
Yeah.
And they had the Nile for irrigation. So there's absolutely no reason why they couldn't have grown grapes and made wine in Egypt as well. And they could have made good wine. But I don't think, as far as I'm aware, we've got less knowledge of what sort of wine.
At least not diluted with seawater.
We better arrange a visit to Egypt to go and investigate further.
Let's go. If we brought Socrates here or in the 67.1, we handed a glass of modern wine, what would you think what he gonna say?
It's a good question, and it's an interesting one. One answer to that question is that he'd be horrified, and it would taste totally unfamiliar, and he would think, oh, that's awful, surely you can do better than that. Because it would be so unfamiliar to him, red or white, it would be so unfamiliar. If it was a sherry or a Madeira, he might think, oh, that's not too bad. Still a bit unfamiliar. But the other side of Socrates, you see, Socrates was a Stoic, and for Stoics, there wasn't much difference between pain and pleasure, okay? They didn't really, for them, it's almost if they took pleasure in pain. So possibly if it was totally undrinkable and he hated it, I'd like to think that Socrates would actually have laughed it off.
Socrates.
I can take this. Why not? Why not? Another day, another drink. So,
Philosophy better with wine 400 BC.
we've had 2,400 years to experiment with it, to see whether our philosophy improves with wine. I think we can drink to that.
Brilliant, cheers.
To the ancients and what we've learned from them. Thanks, Liz.
Stop
I mean,
tonight.
that's what I was.
Thank you so much, Richard.